goals, dreams and goals, dreams and goals. Get
What was her name? Dude, whatever. You know I'm terrible at names. This is why we don't record. So what was her name? Wellington, same thing. Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah. Hey, either way, she shows up with like an entourage.
Yeah.
And so we're in an Airbnb. It's just us three, and we see 3 cars outside, and it's like a couple gangbangers pop out, and one guy doesn't have an arm, and I'm like, what is going on? I'm like, we're about to get murdered. And so he's like, I'm OG Booby Black. It's like, Dustin Gutkowski, nice to meet you, And so I'm like, who is this guy? So I look him up, and he was like a real gangbanger. Yeah. And he got shot, what was it, like 21 times, like lost his arm. But like he was like in Louisiana when it was like Lil Wayne was coming up, but he was like a real life gangbanger. He ran a gang, all this stuff. And now he's become like a motivational life coach after he got out of prison. He's doing really well. She was doing really well, but she started telling the story about she was a stripper at 14, had to get a fake ID. And I was like, what did we just get ourselves into? And they're all sitting there, and I'm like, oh man, like what episode?
I mean, that sounds like you could have turned that one day into 2 or 3 and got some really good.
Whole thing, right? And he was crazy. Like, this is why it's so fun to do it in person.
Yeah.
Because you never would have thought that would have came out great. Ironically, outside of the Patrick Bet David episode, that's our most viewed one. Like organically, most viewed. Hers is the most viewed one. Yeah. And it's the reason I like to put myself out there is like, look, you're out of your comfort zone. It's something I normally wouldn't do. And it's like, we're going to Florida. We filmed, I think, like 7 or 8 episodes while we were there for 2 days. Yeah. And you just meet so many people from, obviously you get athletic directors. We had high school coach on. We had UFC fighters. We've had the UFC president for the gyms. We had the Ghost Adventures guy on, and we got the room. It was something moved across the room. So I watched. I was like, oh man. So we've just it's fun to be able to do this, right? I love it, and I'm hoping one day we can do it. Just to, it's like.
Hey Jared, didn't you do some gangbanging back in Lockney?
Not really.
Yeah,
it was way far from that. So
was it there?
No.
I don't even know where Lockney is.
Nobody does.
It's in the middle of nowhere, West Texas. So
Been there.
It's north of Lubbock,
so
about 60 miles.
Yeah, it's just West Texas. There's no way. It's fake.
Yeah, she used to work at the Thai company.
Okay, yeah. Oh, yeah.
What's the population?
It was like, well, at its peak, 2,300. I bet it's under 2,000 now for sure. Crazy. But no, it's anytime somebody says they know where Lockney's at, they legitimately had to be there.
You had to be there. Yeah, for something.
Yeah. I mean, that's how we all learned. Those dirt roads cut us loose at 8 or 9.
Is that where you were born and raised?
It was.
That's crazy. Like I thought I was from a small town, but I was not that small.
We had one. Back in the day. Now it's a stop sign. The mark of a town there. We had Dairy Queen and we had Allsup. So like those are the 2 staples we had.
Every small town has a Dairy Queen. So I grew up in the Butte Kyle area, and at the time they were 2 different cities, and they were very small town. It was a super small town. Nothing open past 8, 9 o'clock. It was the Sack and Pack.
Oh, yeah.
There was a Butte Grocery, and there was Dairy Queen. That's all you had. Well, actually, so I take that back. Butte had the Butte Grocery and the Sack and Pack. We got a McDonald's like later on, or Burger King. But then Kyle had the Dairy Queen. So if you want a Dairy Queen, you go to the Dairy Queen. That's where it's at.
Well, funny story, like growing up, my parents on our birthday, they'd let us pick where we wanted to go eat. Plainview was the closest town, so it was probably 15, 20-minute drive. And they had a few restaurants. Well, one time, my sister, this was when she was really little, my parents, of all the places, where do you want to go for your birthday dinner? She's like, I want Allsup's burritos. So, like, I mean, only in a small town are you getting that request.
That's all you can. Yeah. Well, it's like now, so I put everybody, like, Dairy Queen is my favorite place to eat, and I'm like, you got to get the tacos from Dairy Queen. Yeah. They're like, tacos? I'm like, you don't know about the tacos? Because that's all we had. So there was like, and I go, if you're really lucky and you go to a small town, they have this Mexican plate. They'll have enchiladas with, it's like you get 2 enchiladas, you get 2 tacos. And they're like, what are you talking about? You don't get it at Dairy Queen. I'm like, it is the best tacos you'll ever have. And they're like, no, it's not. But that was a request. It's like, where do you want to go? I'm like, I want to go to Dairy Queen to get the tacos.
Tacos were sneaky good at Dairy Queen.
They are.
That and steak fingers.
Yes, with the gravy. That's the way to go.
Dude.
The which one?
The chicken fried steak sandwich.
Oh yeah.
I haven't had the chicken fried steaks. Look, if it ain't broke, don't break it. Like I go, I get my tacos and I get my Blizzard, and that's it. Like I don't. You want to try something else? No, I'm good. This is the way it goes. Are we? Oh, look at you! All subs bean. We got beef and bean burritos.
We got a 24-pack. Holy cow!
139. Wow.
24 will wreck you for a really long time.
That's it's a gut buster.
Yeah, the price you're paying on that's way above sticker price.
Yeah. That's not Lockney prices. That's not. That's inflation at its finest. What are we? Are we ready? Okay, we are live with a DG show. We should have actually been recording that because that was great. Jared, thank you for coming on. I'm excited. We've had this little run of coaches, and I know you're the athletic director in Dallas at North Texas, right? How long have you been there?
So got to Denton in 2016. So been there 8 years. Coming up on 2 years as the athletic director there at University of North Texas.
When you first got there, and obviously hometown, the reason I love coaches, athletic directors, I was telling this story earlier. It's just there's a lot of kids out there that don't have father figures, and coaches is that close as you're going to get for a lot of kids, myself included. And I was telling this earlier. It's like you don't realize those impact that some of those people have on your life that they did then until you get older, and you're like, I wish I would have a little bit nicer to them. I wish I should have appreciated it a little bit more. But it's so impactful, and to me, it's one of the most, obviously take out being a father, right? But it's one of the most important things. A leader. I actually look for people when we hire, like people from sports backgrounds, because I'm like, man, that guy's been coached. He's used to being coached. They usually respond well to it if they've had any type of success. And so I appreciate what you do. I think it's even though I know coaches and stuff are paid, well, I still don't think it's enough, right? It's crazy what you have to deal with and the pressure. And I was just saying today, we have 150 employees, 170, and you get everybody's worst. Like typically people don't come to your coach or athletic director because they have exciting news. It's something that happened. It's something that's going on. There's a problem. And so you get everyone's worst at all times, but you have to give your best no matter what's going on. So it's a difficult job, but I guess how heavy lies the crown, right? So
no, it's the weight of leadership. I mean, it really doesn't matter whether it's in athletics or running a business. I mean, you can go from one chair. I can recall being the chief operating officer at North Texas. I slept better every night. I'm doing the same job as I was doing for my boss, but when you carry that with you, the weight of that leadership is something that's really tough. And you talk about the importance of athletics. It's why I've stayed in this my entire life. I know the impact it had for me. And, when you think about in a college setting with the young men and women we have, there is not another person on our campus has the number of hours invested in somebody's life than what we have with a student athlete. I mean, we touch them the most. We're there with them every day. And so I really view this opportunity for us in athletics. You want to win games, you want to compete. But at the end of the day, if we're not doing something much bigger to help somebody step into a great future and career and become a great husband, wife, whatever, we failed. I mean, all the trophies and all the stuff, that stuff eventually fades. But you want to lead people in the opportunities we have in athletics to a place where they're going to be chasing and being their best self when they get out of college.
That's the ultimate goal. That's exactly what we talk about here. Is even though we model a lot of our stuff after sports, right? Yep. I mean, it's probably the cliches, but the Tom Brady's and the Kobe Bryant's, cliches are cliches for a reason because they're true, right? And we model a lot of what we do after sports. We're highly, highly competitive. We're us against the world, but it's not about really the wins and losses. It's just about one, can you learn from the losses? Like just even with me, I don't get caught up in the losses. I'm like, look, man, if you lose, it's a part of life. You're not going to get through perfect, but like don't dwell on your loss. Dwell on what did you do to lose, and then how can we move on from that? Okay, so here's the problem. Now let's immediately focus on solutions. Like why did this happen? Let's ensure that it doesn't happen again. But let's move on. It's not the end of the world. Like, can we get better from this? Do we know why it happened? And what are 3 to 5 tangible things we can do to make sure this doesn't happen again? And I love the analogies with sports because I think it plays in life through everything, like your business, your family, being a father, a husband. It's so much. It's the parallels to sports are so aligned.
Yeah, and you run into situations. I think thinking about games, you digest those, and even some games where you performed well, did exactly what you wanted to do, you executed the game plan. Sometimes it just doesn't go your way, and I mean that's life every day. I mean you can have everything planned and mapped out and have everything, all your I's dotted and your T's crossed. But where can I take things from those times of failure that, one, I don't have to repeat that again. But then it is also good to just teach people, listen, sometimes you just get slugged in the mouth and you just got to figure out how to get back up and move forward. And so I think the lessons learned in athletics, they've certainly served me well in my life, but I think for people who have that opportunity to experience that, it translates well into everything you do.
You said athletics impacted you. How so? Like, what was there's probably a million, but what's the one or two most important things you remember, like how it impacted you and you still use today?
I look at first where I came from. I came from a little small town, Lockney, Texas.
Huge town.
2,000 people. Mom was a teacher, dad was a farmer, and really in a town like that, you're not exposed to everything that's out there. So like early, you had an option. You could go be a farmer. I didn't want to do that. And then I always loved athletics, and I appreciated the coaches in my life. And so I look at sports and just knowing the opportunities it's presented to me. I could never dream the life I have today, but it all came through the platform of sports and the exposure there. And then, I just think back, we can all tell stories. I can think back to very specific coaches who at a particular time in your life were able to simplify a lesson, help you simplify your perspective, give you the motivation, the encouragement. Like there's just countless things I could point to over my career where people intentionally invested in me and allowed me to dig deeper or to see something I didn't see in myself. Yeah. And like I think that's the power of a coach. And it's part of why I love, and when I talk to our coaches, I always remind them, like, we can't take for granted what we do. To us, it may not seem like a big deal, but it's like planting a seed. Sometimes that seed will take root today, and we get to benefit seeing the fruit of our labor. Other times we plant that seed, it may not take root for 20 years. And I can think back to even some of my teammates, like, the lessons that were poured into them in college at the time, they definitely took for granted. But then you fast forward 10 or 12 years, and all that's culminated in a moment where they've been able to step into, whether it's relationship with a wife or their kids or see them flourish in business. You just can't take for granted those little small seeds you plant every day.
Yeah. Are you the tallest guy to ever come through your town?
I would say yes. I mean, there's not too much bigger. I mean, I definitely stuck out, when I was there for sure.
But it is. So I laugh. It's not funny, but you have to laugh at it. I came from a very troubled childhood, homeless at 14. Bounced around. People knew that. I played football, was pretty good at it. Played basketball, pretty good at it. It didn't work out. There was obviously various reasons, still excuses, right? But bouncing around couch, I was all over the place, and I was taking care of brother. But it was I loved the sports aspect, and I always kept a good relationship with my coaches. And I talked about this the other day because the most disciplined I ever was in football, right? And I always got in trouble. And my coach was like, Dustin, you just keep that smart ass mouth of yours shut. And I just couldn't do it. And I didn't like things that if I didn't like it, I didn't pay attention. And that's what it called chaos. And he was like, I think it's really funny that you don't get in trouble in math, you don't get in trouble in history. And he's like, what are your two favorite subjects? And I was like, math and history. He's like, go figure. Everything else, I was a disaster. And so every day at practice, I would run. I have to do agiles and I have to do extra. And he's like, every day. He's like, one day you're going to get tired of this. And I was like, so when I stopped football, I went off the rails for a couple of years. There was no discipline. I had no discipline at home. Didn't know my father. My stepdad was an idiot. Then I obviously was homeless. And then I was bouncing around for everywhere. I mean, there was nights sleeping on a park bench. But I lost that discipline and I guess that brotherhood of football. So I was always kind of chasing it again, and you don't find it. And when you do find it, you find it in the wrong reasons. And so I laugh because I go, I'm probably the only ever fifth year redshirt freshman in high school. It took me 5 years to graduate. And my senior year, I really wanted to. I was trying to be better, right? Like trying. And I was trying to get out of certain things I was doing, trying to get away from the stuff that I was doing, but it was hard. And I remember I had one of our defensive coaches, Coach Gaddy, he was an incredible coach. Like, he taught me a lot. I remember even when I was younger, he'd go feed the homeless, and he's just an incredible man. Unfortunately, he passed away. But I remember it was him and another guy, Coach Riley, unfortunately passed away as well. But they always like checked in on me, and I remember Coach took me in on one of these, like, I had to do the alternative was on our campus, and I was doing these other, and I was like, Coach, man, I remember when I was disciplined when you just had me running all the time. And I said, I really wish I could just get back in agiles again. He's like, you don't want that. I said, yes, sir, I do. And he's like, I'll make you a deal. You get these grades up, and I'll let you get in off-season agiles with the JV team. And I was 18 years old, and I was literally my 5th year. And I was like, are you serious? And he was like, yeah, but you know what that's like. JV does it upstairs. There's no AC. It's in the attic, and you're running mat drills, and we're doing drills 5 days a week. And he's like, and by the way, I know you have an off period before your lunch, so you have to do it during off period. I was like, man, are you kidding me? And he gave me that opportunity, and I remember the first day I went, I was obviously dying, but I hated it, but I loved it. And I'll never forget, after I got out, I got my first job at 24 Hour Fitness. I was in the fitness world, and it reminded me of that. But I excelled there, ended up buying my first home, had a lot of success. And recently, people were talking about, how are you so disciplined there, and how were you able to do this? You came from all this stuff and blah, blah, blah. And I was like, yeah, I was disciplined on a lot of things like work, but I was undisciplined on personal. And then recently it hit me, and I was like, you know what it was? It was my senior year of high school, and they let me do agiles, and I was doing it 5 days a week, and I was doing it with these kids, and I at the time I didn't realize it, but they were like, why are you doing this, you idiot? Get out of here. You have a choice, we don't. And Coach would be like, you're inspiring these kids to push, because I'm super competitive, so I didn't want to lose, and I didn't want these young cats to beat me, so I'm trying to be first on every drill. And he was like, you're inspiring them to be better. And I got really close with some of those kids, and I still have a relationship with some of those kids that were younger than me. And I was like, that catapulted my life in so many different ways, and I didn't know it. And he had I was actually a liability. Like, I shouldn't have been in that class. If I would have gotten a fight or something, or if I would have caused some kind of problem, like, it would have been, I was not supposed to be there, but he took a risk on me. And I was like, man, that's what leadership is all about. Like, it was totally inconvenience for him. I was a train wreck of a student. I was a lost cause as a kid, but he saw something in me and gave me that opportunity. And when I look back, I'm like, wow, I never appreciated that until, recently. And I'm 41 years old now, and I was a kid then. And so it took me 20 plus years to, like you said, plant that seed when I was 18 years old. Fast forward, 22, 23 years later, I'm like, that was part of where my discipline came from, because I'll never forget that year. I was like, I can't lose to this. And it just taught me to go, 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 go.
Well, kudos to you. I think about, you mentioned discipline. I've learned in my life, it's one of the things I think athletics taught me, and it reminds me of a Mike Tyson quote where he says, discipline is doing the thing that you hate to do, but doing it like you love it. Mm-hmm. And like you think about in athletics, those things that were hard that you hated in the moment, but it creates something inside of you that you just realize stacking consistent days, whatever it is, even if it's the stuff I don't like, the next day gets a little bit easier, and you just do it. And for us, you stay fit. It looks like you still are very active. My wife jokes with me. She's like, you can take a day off from your workout. And I'm like, I can't, because I know for me, those little things like that's a habit that I've had forever. And so like when you look at other areas that may be a weakness or things that I do struggle with, I always revert back to that mindset of, hey, just get out there and figure it out. Do it and stack a couple days together and then see what happens. And then you look up and you realize, you find the joy. That discipline becomes something that is something you actually look forward to, even though it may not be great.
Yep.
But that old Mike Tyson quote, if you can take something you don't like but do it like you love it, that's the ultimate form of discipline.
That he has two of my favorites, that one. And everybody has a plan until they get punched in the mouth, right? And I'm like, there's two types of people. You get punched in the mouth and you fold, or you come back swinging. You've been athletic director, you said 2 years? Or
to my 2 years there,
but
North Texas.
You've been, what were you doing before you were athletic director?
So I started when I graduated, I played basketball professionally for a little while overseas, and then went back to my alma mater, Abilene Christian University, where I played. Started working there and ended up being an athletic director there at 26.
Oh, wow.
And so did that for 10 years. Got out of college athletics, had an opportunity to Texas Sports Hall of Fame in Waco. Good friend of mine. He's in executive search. His name's Bob Bodine, a mentor of mine and just a good friend. But he reached out and said, hey, I think there's an opportunity to keep you in sports and help you kind of expand your network, but you ought to look at it. And so I got out of college athletics and was the CEO of the Texas Sports Hall of Fame for 2 years until, again, a close friend of mine that I grew up in the business, got the AD job at North Texas. He's now the athletic director at West Virginia, Ren Baker. He invited me to come back, and so I'm here today. But I had opportunities, some really good opportunities at a young age to kind of learn on the fly.
That's amazing. So were you ever coaching, or did you go straight to athletic director?
So when I did GA for 2 seasons, so I was a graduate assistant on our basketball program. Really chose the administrative path. My wife and I were married. We found out we were pregnant with our first son, and we're at a crossroads. I love coaching, and I miss that part of it, but the recruiting world of coaching will just eat your life. It'll take all of it. And so I felt like the administrative side would give me a little more balance for family. And so it has been crazy, but I will say this, the life of a coach, I mean, it is nonstop. So it's been fun for my kids to at least be able to be a part of some of the activities and things I get to do in my job now.
That's awesome. One of my really good friends, he's older, Terry Watson, him and his twin brother played at North Texas back in the day. Okay. And they loved it. What is being athletic director, what do you think the biggest difference is between obviously the admin and the travel, but philosophy wise, you deal with all the coaches, right? You have to deal with all the coaches. Are you in charge of the hiring process for every single one?
So I do hire all of our head coaches, and then I've got an executive team. Some people like a flat structure. I need a little bit deeper structure, partly because philosophically I think, as you elevate in business, there's certain things you like and you gravitate towards, but once you become the CEO or in the top seat, there are certain aspects of that job that only you can do. And so Your job as a leader is, how can I start to empower other people and allow people to do their jobs? And so we've got an executive team of 4 that report directly to me that we work pretty closely with, but kind of those are the people I work with very directly on a day-to-day basis.
I love that you said empower instead of delegate. I think there's a huge difference between empowering people and delegating. I feel like we get so wrapped up in delegating, like it freezes up to do nothing, and it's like, no, it's empowering others to be able to do their job and guiding them. You don't just delegate. I think there's such a huge difference. So what do you think for people, like the fundamental difference between, because you're still heavily involved in the sports world, right? Like you're the athletic director, so you might not be coaching the kids, but you're coaching the people that are coaching the kids. What do you think the fundamental difference between what you do as an athletic director opposed to the head football coach or head basketball coach?
I mean, I think there's a lot of similarities. I mean, I think the one difference that I have to be intentional about is I don't get as much face time with student athletes as a coach does. And so I try to be very intentional, and every time I can be at a home game across all sports, I'm going to try to at least make an appearance.
That's awesome.
I try to find opportunities to, when I'm on the road and traveling with a team, to get to spend time with student athletes. Because at the end of the day, I need to work with coaches. My job is to help resource coaches, whether it's financial resources or take off their plate things to allow them to do their jobs better. So resource development's significant in my role as an athletic director. But at the end of the day, my job is solely tied to those young men and women who come to North Texas. And so I never want to be so far removed that a student athlete can't come in and tell me what they're struggling with, what's going well, maybe a process issue that they've encountered that I could maybe help them overcome. But I think coaches on a day-to-day basis, definitely their impact and direct line with student athletes is a significant difference. But really, even for a head coach, it's a CEO role now. I mean, it's not. All of us would love to just say, forget the administrative. I just want to do my job. So there is that element of coaches. If you're the head coach, there's unfortunately things you're going to have to do in that role that you didn't have to as an assistant. Yeah. Much like, coming up, I'd be curious, just as you've grown a business very similar, what, those challenges when you're trying to scale and then you're moving up, like it's noticeable what you feel. So I'd flip that question because I'd love to just hear, as you've grown your business, what are those things as you've just things go? How's the role changed for you?
It does. We talked about that. So we do. I love, and I feel like I'm the people business, right?
Yep.
And I just love that. And I've always said, like, I work for them; they don't work for me. And we talked about this morning. So we do a workout group. There's 10 to 12 of us every morning. We work out in my garage, right? Even as a CEO, it's like, you know, I don't look as I'm some big CEO. And sometimes people are like, you should probably act like it. You know, our company's north of $100 million. Like, we are a big company, but I don't see it that way. I'm very like, you know, hey, these are my people. These are who the people I love to spend time with. So we come to my house every morning. We cold plunge. We do an intense workout. We do dry sauna, and then we do a good word afterwards. You know, prayer, talking about something. And that was one of the things of where November will be in business for 5 years. And so, you know, the first 2 years I was in the field every day, and you're in the field and you're in the dirt and you're working in there. But, you know, as you grow, obviously larger problems come up. And so I've had a lot of the last 2 years, I can say the fun part about me is, or the fun part about the job to me is, I'm now almost watching people from above, and you're seeing, it's like everything's thrown at you. You've seen it all. It comes at you like everybody's worst. You see the problems. You almost know what's going to happen. You almost know at this point what someone's going to say before they even say it. And that's a very dangerous world to live in, because you already know. But watching I never got to see people's growth when it's like, you know, when you're in the forest, you don't see the trees. And now I get to see people's growth, good and bad, right?
Yeah.
And that to me has been such a fun part of it. And the difference of, we talked to delegating and empowering, it's a struggle because I'm a competitor and I want to do things. And I'm the type of person where I don't delegate things, because if I can do it, why not just do it, right? Yeah. But you have to be able to teach people and empower them to do things there. And I actually said this morning. I said, I was like, you guys know why we're successful. And, you know, the guys were like, well, culture, you know, people said leadership and the vision and this. And I said, you know, outside of the people, right? But I go, the people's the reason. I said, it's because we have a group that has bought into a standard. And I have weaknesses, I have issues, I have all the above. But everything that I have as a weakness, I have people on this team that they don't highlight it. They do what I don't do, and they do it well. And no one points the finger. And then the same thing, whether it's as a partner or a leader, there's things that they do well and they don't. And I never highlight what they don't do well, right? I'm not asking Tom Brady to go throw blocks or run routes, because I don't care. I don't need that. I just need you to throw the ball. And for me, it's been be able to take the ego aside and understand that the only thing that I care about is making people better and winning championships. I'm not here to be your friend. I don't want to be your friend. And I'd rather you hate me and go be great than be your friend and watch you fail. And it's taking that ego aside and saying, this guy is better than me at this, and I need him to continue to do that, and empower him to do it, and trust he's going to do it. And if he does fail at it, it's my fault. And I need to take accountability that I'm the person that empowered him to do it. So it's 100% my fault. And if we do have a problem and we have a tough conversation, don't be egotistical involved, like, you can't talk to me that way, you can't do that. And it's been able to mature and grow. And it is tough, because when you're at the top, there's no one pushing you. There's nobody pushing you. There's no one telling you to show up. There's no one telling you to be better. And so you have to read, study, and analyze. And then you have to be very careful, because there's only so many people out there that you can model yourself after, right? There's only so many people, so you have to have a strategy around who you're talking to, who you're dealing with, who you let in. I've said, like, there's no outside noise for me. It's the noise between my head, and that's the only thing that really matters. And I think I take a lot of pride in, I want to help people. And that's I look for two things in leadership. And if I could ever sum up leadership into just two things, for me, it's, first thing is outcare everyone. If you outcare everyone, you're going to win. And the second thing is what I always look for is, I'm always looking to create people wins. Yeah. Like, I just want to create wins for people. And so they're like, how'd you know I was going through something? I said, because I don't ever look for what you're doing wrong. I don't want to catch you doing things wrong. I don't want to focus on what you're doing wrong. I look for how you act. I look for how you talk. I look for what you do. I don't listen to what you say, because I watch what you do. And then if I notice something's off, I'm going to try to help you through that. And they're like, how'd you know I was going through something? I'm like, your mannerisms. And I look to create people wins. I want to build up and stack those wins every day. And for me, during this process, it's just been a learning experience. And it's I could say, if I could boil it down to the most important thing, it's been understanding who I am as a person, understanding who I am as a father, and then once I knew who I was, then I was, okay, this is a weakness. Okay, this is why this is. How could I get better? And then what does that person look like? And I'm constantly trying to be better than the person I was yesterday. And I'm not always great at it, and I fail at it. But I can say it's been so much fun watching people's growth from above and watching leaders become better leaders and watching people develop leaders and trying to create future leaders that it's been great. And I think it all starts with understanding, like, you know, I can't do this by myself, and I never need to. And if I want to win championships, I'm going to need great players around me. I'm going to need the people sometimes that are even better than me. And it's how we've been able to grow. And I think staying, you know, humble as a person, but just a shark or a dog in business is that I'm going to protect this at all costs. This is my baby. These are my guys, and I am not going to let you or anyone else come between this, and I'll defend it with my life. And I have that attitude. I have that kill everybody. Like, I have that, if you're not with us, you're against us. I'm coming for your soul. I want to take your soul. I want to bury it, dig it up to take it again, just so you know, don't ever compete with us again. But also at the same time is I would do anything in the world for anyone on this team, without a doubt, right? And I think it works for me.
Yeah.
It doesn't work for everybody. You see those, like, I use the Kobe kind of LeBron, the Jordan LeBron. You would never see Jordan and Kobe vacationing with other team. You just wouldn't happen.
Yeah.
It worked for them. LeBron's going on trips with these other guys and celebrating. That will never happen with me. I don't want to hang out with other roofing companies. I don't want to do that stuff. It works for me, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't work for everybody. So that's been kind of my run.
No, it's it reminds me, and you and I have a lot of similar values. You know, there's a lot of things in athletics that you can focus on, the details of winning. That stuff's non-negotiable. But when I got this job, I was thinking about, because I'd already been here 6.5 years when I got the AD job, so most of the people knew me. You know, typically you walk into a situation, you're kind of listening, you're going to have some time to cast a vision. Well, these folks already knew me, so I'm trying to think, how can I connect, and what's going to be the platform we're going to build this thing together on. And I was working out and on the elliptical, listening to a John Maxwell podcast, and he said, success happens to you, significance happens through you, and once you taste significance, success will never satisfy. And that just hit me in the stomach, because I view like athletics, and it sounds like you with your people, if we're doing through our work, whatever that is, providing significance back to the people I serve, or our alumni that we serve, or our donors that we serve, if I'm doing that, the byproduct's going to be the success on the other side of that equation. And so, like, I love that, because my heart for what I do, I want to be competitive. I want to win. As long as there's a scoreboard, that's a part of the equation. But when you think about legacy and what's going to impact people's lives the most, is really, are we doing things that matter to people and helping them realize their potential? Yep. And when you do that, everybody wins. I'm starting to get known for this, and I don't know if it's a good thing, but one of my friends had a podcast the other day, and he was talking about, he's like, man, my buddy Dustin has a standard. I wasn't on the podcast. And he said, if you're a bad father, he won't let you work for him. And I was like, this could go really good or really bad. But I've been known for this, and because I believe that I've never, ever met a bad father who's a good person. It just hasn't happened. And maybe I'm wrong with that. But to this day, I've never met someone who was a bad father and then it turned out to be a good person. And so I had this standard, like, if you're going to be around me as a man, you first and foremost, you have to be a father. And here's why. The one person that needed you the most in your life, if you weren't there for, you'll never be there for anyone else. And I just have a standard that I don't want to be around people like that. And and so I'm like, am I really being known for that? And I'm like, I am, because I think it's one of the most important jobs in the world, right? You have to be there for your kids because you brought them into this world. It was your choice, not theirs. And I believe that. Be a good father, be a good husband. Doesn't mean you can't make mistakes. And then when you go into coaching or you lead, it's like you're almost some people's father figure. And we have people on our team that I know I am. And they're like, well, how do you deal with that person? And I'm like, did it ever occur to you that this 21-year-old kid, 25-year-old kid, he didn't grow up with a father? This is his first real job that anyone's ever gave him any kind of inspiration or standard. And he just doesn't know yet. He hasn't been through the leadership or the coaching we've been through. So this is the first time he's getting this. So it's all new to him. He's learning as he's going. He's different. He's at a different point in the process than you are, right? Yeah. So you have to have that empathy and that patience that,
it's hard because I'm a competitor, right? And I want to get things done, and I'm in the face about it. So it's kind of my standard. I would say my North Star is that if you're a great father, I want to be around you because I think you could do things great, and I want to inspire the people, I want to empower them, I want to do these things.
Yeah,
So.
no, it's the role you carry in life. There's none more important than that father role, and I think that's there's a lot of wisdom in that. You watch people interact with their families, their wives, their kids. You learn a lot about how people operate.
They do. Sure. I have this phobia we just talked about on the last one. I have this dream that it just reoccurs that somebody's going to line up my 3 kids and they go, "Who's your hero?" and they don't pick me.
Yeah,
that just strives for me to be better every single day, and I want to live that example for people. And when people tell me I'm a great father, I still don't think I am. It still is that competitor in me. It's like when I see a guy wearing a number 1 dad T-shirt, I'm like, "Hey man, you about to get Mike Tyson? Like, don't wear that shirt."
Yeah.
And it's a competitiveness. But for you elevated ACU's Division II, right? You guys went to Division I, and I mean, let's really kind of put them on the map when you're an athletic director. And now you're seeing North Texas do the same thing. Like, what are some of the things you've been able to do to elevate these programs? And then kind of 2-part on that, you're in DFW, you're dealing with some big boys, SMU, TCU. How have you been able to compete with them? Because when you drive up Denton now, it's a known campus, and people know the North Texas is now. So how have you been able to elevate these programs? Because you've done it twice now, right?
No, that's a great question, and I haven't really thought about it, but I would say a couple of things that I think are kind of at the core of that. One, I think anytime you can get people to connect the mission to their daily work, you realize there's a camaraderie and a connectedness that's just tough to. We all know people who check in, they're getting the check, they're walking out the door. The work doesn't mean anything to them, and so I've always tried to, because for me, if I don't have that in my life, I wouldn't be doing this job. If I didn't feel the connectedness to the mission and the purpose of what we do in college athletics, I should go do something else. And so I want people to be wired that way. So I think when you have significant opportunities to grow, when you've got a team that shares in that, it certainly makes the journey better. I think the other thing is you talked about having a standard. I think there's always got to be, you have to continually keep in front of your organization what the priorities are. And as a leader, you're the only one who can say that. And so do you articulate that clearly? Do people have a clear picture of what, at the time, Abilene Christian could have been athletically? Do they have a clear picture of what North Texas can be? Can we talk openly about where we're short and where there's gaps?
Yeah.
And so, like, for me, a lot of it, too, I've been fortunate to be with some phenomenal the alignment with leadership above me at those institutions, the presidents, the board of regents, the key donors who help fuel a lot of what we get to do in athletics. It'd be like, investors on your front. When you have alignment there and everybody's on the same page and you're not having to circle back and constantly either put out a fire or clarify or try to drag somebody along, like, you exponentially open up what's ahead of you. And so I think in both those instances, you had great people in the trenches, but you had significant alignment up top that allowed you to just really step out and realize the potential that both of those institutions have. And so particularly at North Texas, you look at North Texas, we're the 3rd largest institution in Texas now, behind A&M in Texas. We're a Carnegie Tier 1 research institution. We're the fastest growing institution in the state of Texas. Like, all those boxes you check, like, there's no reason we shouldn't be able to piece together the puzzle to have an athletic program that allows us to continue to tell those great stories. And so I'm super excited about where we're at right now, and just feel like when you look at those two things, there are a couple of common factors that really help propel our opportunities there. That's
awesome. Well, how do you, obviously you have a hand in that. You talked about, and I agree, I don't think it's what you do, it's who you do it with is really the most important thing, and it's alignment. So, my business partners and I, it's great alignment. Like, it's the communication, it's the over communication. What are some of the things that you've done? Because look, there is a difference. Like, a lot of people have a problem or a challenge with coaching up, right? It's when you're dealing with people that are above you. I use the example, 3 of my business partners that I have, they were all my boss. So, and like when they were my boss, I was low level. So it wasn't like we were, I was a VP and they were president, or I was the, COO and they were the CEO. Like I was a sales rep and they were like a VP 30 levels above me. And so now that I'm their boss, it's a different world. But I can tell a lot of people have the challenge of they don't want to coach up, right? It's hard to coach up, but that's what really creates alignment. You don't want to be confrontational, but you want to be able to, ask questions and communicate. How have you been able to keep that communication from people that, maybe are above you, that you answer to, but also you have to keep that same dialogue, for the people that answer to you and for the people that are your peers? How are you, because that's where the alignment comes, because most people struggle with, they'll do really well here, they'll do maybe okay here, but they struggle here, or they struggle and then nobody's on the same page and you get a lot of disalignment. So how have you been able to keep that alignment?
And I'm still learning. Every day I learn. We make changes even internally when you talk about communication. There's things we've implemented in the last 12 to 18 months that I would say have moved the needle significantly for us. So it's not like something I've had and you just cookie cutter. I think you've always got to be ready to be adaptive when it comes to communication, because the bigger you get, the biggest challenge is, does everybody know what's going on?
Absolutely.
And to me, I don't feel like I need to be in front of people because I'm the athletic director at UNT, but my staff reminds me, they're like, hey, everybody several degrees down from you, they all want to hear and see you. So like the power of your words and presence matters. And so that's helped me to just remember, whether I think it's important or not, you've got to just make yourself do it. And then I think I learned this from my Ren Baker, my boss at North Texas, who brought me along, is now at West Virginia. He was a master at being 2 steps. He played chess with communications and strategy. And a lot of that is, some of that's with your president and board and cabinet. And so figuring out how to get into good rhythms with what they want to know and how often they want to know it. And I'm going through a presidential transition right now. We've got a new president that started August 1st. And like one of my first questions is, I want to know is, how often do you want information from me? How do you like to receive it? And when bad news happens, what do you want me to email, call, text? And like, if you can get on the same page around how you're going to translate that, most of it becomes a pretty simple conversation. It's not intimidating. It's not the trickier part. And this is, we probably have some commonalities there, is when you start looking at other champions for you who need to be in the know, like really trying to identify. You can't just have everybody in that circle, but there is a core group of people you better have in 100%. Your corner behind you, so that when you get ready to go execute something, if you did hit a roadblock or a bump, they're there to kind of be a support and a champion for you. And so, it is interesting when you think about that communication up. It looks a little different now with my new president than the previous. And you just have to know, in this role, you got to adapt to them. Like, your job is to meet their expectation, not vice versa.
Yeah, so many people struggle with that. So many people want everyone to meet their expectations. And I'm like, look, if you want to get anywhere in life, give everyone around you what they want first, and it'll make your life easy, right? Then it's not there, but they struggle with it. They take it so personally and not professionally.
Yeah,
it's like, if he wants the information that way, but it's credit to you. You ask, so now you know. There's no assumptions. Most people assume. They just assume, well, this is the way I want it, so maybe he wants it that way. Yeah. But now that you know, you give him the information he wants it. You talked about you're constantly learning and growing, and I know you mentioned John Maxwell earlier. Love John Maxwell. I think he's phenomenal. How do you, in your position, obviously you've had some success, how do you constantly grow and adapt, right? Because you do hit, it's like you can only get so strong, right? And the mind and knowledge is, you can constantly be learning, but when you know nothing, it's easier to learn things. When you've been in a position, you've become successful, it is sometimes, unfortunately, easy to fall in that trap of continue to do what you've always done, because maybe you're scared to lose it, maybe it's what worked. But when you get to your level, how do you constantly improve and adapt, and what are some of the things you do to continue to go to that next level?
So I love to read. So and with my travel, I either try to have a podcast or I read. And my wife jokes, I don't read fiction or drama. I read business and self-help and athletic related material. And part of that is I just think people, particularly outside of athletics, I think we all fall into the trap. We want to lean into the people in our business, and sometimes you're better served getting somebody with a perspective that has nothing to do
Absolutely.
with the business you're in. And so I lean into that. I'll also say I've got a core group of both people within the college athletic industry, but I also kind of have a small group of men and mentors that are completely outside of college athletics. Somewhat of a kind of a personal board of directors, but people who I can call, and if I need to vent, if I need to share just frustrations or get just encouragement, I've got a group there. And then the second thing I'd say, and I didn't realize this when I was a 26-year-old athletic director. My president at the time, Phil Schubert at Abilene Christian, he was working with an executive coach, and he said, listen, if you want to do it, he said, I'll go in and cover half, but I think you would find it super helpful. It's been helpful for me. And so I began working when I was at ACU, began a relationship with a guy out in Nashville, Tennessee, who would come in. He was there. He would come in with my executive team. He would help us quarterly on big initiatives.
That's awesome.
It was also, I had access to just pick up the phone and call them. I work with a couple of guys now that I'm in DFW. We got a lot of resources in the DFW area, but I do think as an executive, it's important to have somebody that you can utilize in that way. Partly because the weight of the leadership, again, like you can't share certain things with even your number two.
Yeah,
like
with anyone.
There's certain things that even that person shouldn't have to carry the weight of that, and you just need a sounding board or advice or wisdom. And so I've been super intentional about trying to make sure every stop I have that I've got that one person who can do that, and it's paid dividends. I mean, some of the greatest lessons I've learned that have carried me through how to lead people and lead people well have been very specific activities or exercises these men led me through. And one I'll share real quick because it's one that I think is hardest for people coming up. I always struggle when you got to performance evaluations. You tend to lean into sugarcoat it, not exactly maybe be as direct as you need to. And we were going through this transition at Abilene Christian University, and he had me walk through and put members in 3 buckets. He said, here's a bucket, and these are the people you don't worry about. You know they're ready, they're primed, they're going to be able to take that next step. He said, this bucket in the middle are people you think are kind of on the fence. You're not real sure, but you kind of think they might be. He said, then there's another bucket of people you know today just no fault of their own, but they're going to struggle with the transition. And so we go through this exercise, and he asked me all these questions. He doesn't tell me what we're going to do at the end. He's walking me through this. And his last thing, he said, all right, you look at these, you agree this is where you got it. Anybody you want to move? No. So he said, this group in the first bucket, he said, you can't just ignore them because they're doing great. You got to figure out how to keep fueling them and be there for them and support them. He said, these in the middle, they can't stay in the middle. He said, in the next 90 days, they've got to either move to the keeper's bucket or move to the bucket where you just don't feel like they're going to be able to do it. He said, in this third bucket, you've got to set the date. And I said, set the date for what? He said, when you're going to tell them not to be a part of your organization. And I was like, whoo. And I immediately went and I started saying, why no? And he said, nope. He said, I already gave you the chance to shuffle people around. You don't get to do that again. And he said, listen, he said, it's the hardest thing for a CEO because you love and you care for people. But he said, you're always going to have some that they're just not going to meet the expectation, or they're not going to be able to meet the new challenge ahead. And it's not personal. But he said, it's like if you leave Abilene and you're taking your family to Disney World in Orlando. He said, you're driving, and he said, 3 hours into the trip, you look up and you see a sign that says El Paso. He said, when are you going to turn around? And I said, immediately. He said, you're not going to wait, another 2 or 3 hours and then take the exit to turn around. He said, no, you're going to turn around today. And he said, your business demands that you do it today. Like, don't put off hard decisions because all you're doing is taking yourself further away from the goal on the other side. So, I just think about, had I not had people outside perspective who had worked with Fortune 500 companies and other people outside of athletics, had I not had somebody walk me through that type of exercise, I'd probably still be rocking along and would have allowed non-performers to stick around and really be a lid for our organization. But so that's an example of I could take 5 or 6 key principles that I carry here that I'll never forget because somebody from the outside was there to help me walk through.
I think I love listening to podcasts, listen to reels, audiobooks, and I'm like, they're like, do you take a lot of stuff from it? And I go, yeah, here and there. I go, but the crazy thing that it does for me is it's like situational awareness. When something comes up, I have some type of perspective on it because I've read it with people that maybe like-minded or been through it. And I think that's, if you go, I mean, I love basketball, so I always, the basketball references, but it's just like Kobe or Michael. They're like, man, they're like, were you nervous in those moments? They're like, no, I practiced this 1,000 times already. So when the game was on the line, what was I going to be nervous about? It was, it's like, what was it? You practice so hard. So when you practice so hard, when you play, it's like practice or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
It's like the game became easier because I practiced so hard. And I have that same mentality. It's like I watch so many different, whether it be a documentary, reels, life coaches, sales, that I have all these things in my head. So when something comes up, I'm like, I'm prepared for it. I've listened to this 5 times. I've got 5 different perspectives. So it's that experience. And I think people, they don't realize how impactful that is in your life. And I actually went through something similar too. I was a young leader coming up when I was at 24 Hour Fitness. I had my own club. I was living a life. I was making a lot of money. I thought I was on top of the world, and I hired one of my friends. He was married, had a kid. He was a little bit older than me. He was like one of my friend's older brothers, but I've known him for a long time. I was like 22, 23. He was like 30, 2 kids. And we hired him on, sales rep, and he wasn't really doing well, but we were friends, so I was treating him as a friend. And I was scared to hold him accountable. I was scared to really tell him what he was doing. So, after 3 months, my boss comes in. He's like, hey, man, your guy's not really doing it. I said, oh, man, I'll talk to him. He's like, he goes, I don't want to write him up, but we need to document. We need to just have a hard conversation. Like, he's got to step it up. I said, yeah, no problem. I'll talk to him. Never talked to him. Second month, he has a bad month. He's like, hey, man, like, this guy's on a special comp plan. We gave him a special salary. He's got to perform. He's like, we got to document this. Like, hey, man, we already talked to you last month. You're not performing. I'm like, I'll talk to him. I'll put it down. And I didn't do it. So then the third month, same thing. And he's like, hey, you got to write him up. And he's like, you got to document. And I was like, all right, man, I'll talk to him. And I still didn't because I was scared. I was just like, oh, man, I want to have this conversation. Like, and I kind of talked to him, but like, hey, man, we got to get some more sales. It was very vague. It wasn't like and so my boss comes in like 2 weeks later, before the end of the month. And he's like, hey, man, we got to let your guy go. And I was like, what? He's like, man, we documented it. We did a warning. We wrote him up, and he's still not doing it. And I'm shaking. I'm scared. He calls him in the office. We're sitting in there, and he starts, telling this guy everything. And the guy just looks at me, and he had this like just this blank stare, and he could have ruined my career. And I probably wouldn't have been fired, but he could have totally threw me under the bus, and he didn't. And he's like, hey, man, unfortunately, we got to let you go. He's like, okay, I understand. And my boss leaves, and I'm embarrassed, and he comes back in my office, and he's like in tears. And he goes, man, why didn't you just tell me? And I go, I'm about to say, because we were friends. He goes, I thought we were friends. Mm. And I was like, well, that's why I didn't tell you. He's like, friends don't do that. Mm. And he goes, I have 2 kids, man. Like, I took this job. He's like, I didn't know that we weren't performing. He's like, you never told me even the expectations. And, I guess part of that is, you're an adult. You should know some of the expectations, when to show up, what you should do. You had job description, all that. But it goes back to like leadership matters. And I'm like, I failed this guy miserably. And it was the most embarrassing situation of my life. I was devastated. I'd never really been like humbled like that. And it was like, wow, I'm terrible at my job. So I actually, a few months later, I confessed. So I told my boss, I said, hey, man, I got to tell you something. And I told him, and he goes, you know what? He goes, you're the best sales rep I have, and you're the worst leader. He goes, you're a great manager, but you're just a horrible leader. And I was like, I run the #1 club. I was like, what are you talking about? I'm mad. He goes, you see what I'm talking about? And he had that tough conversation with me. I was like, how dare you tell me that? And I was so offended. But then when I thought about it, he's right. He's like, you haven't made anyone better. He's like, everyone hates you. You're so competitive that you drive your own people away, and no one wants to work for you. And if you weren't in this great club, then they wouldn't even be here. And I go, well, I'm the reason it's great. That's what I thought. I was a young kid. And But he was right. No one wanted to work for me. If anyone had the option, they wouldn't have worked for me. And I was like, wow, this is because I'm like this. And so it was that life lesson of, you know what? I don't care what people think. I don't care how they feel, but I'm going to tell them how it is. And it's my job to coach them up. And that's where I always get it. It's like, I'd rather you hate me and be great than be your friend and watch you fail. And I'd rather be hated for who I am than loved for who I'm not. And it's a hard thing. And just even to circle back with what you said about telling people, there's things you can't even tell your significant other because they're gonna. It's a balance of if something happens with an employee and you go verbal vomit to them, they think less of that employee and they start to judge. And then you got to be careful, like you said, even if you say something to your number two, they think less of that employee, and it could just be an emotional reaction. So it's really difficult to navigate the emotional balance, the mental strain on you, because very rarely does anyone ever check on you. When you're at the top, they don't check on you how you're doing. They don't care what you're going through. They're assuming that your life's perfect, you have zero problems, and you have unlimited lives to solve everyone else's. And I recently had an employee, he goes, something about, I go, man, the wife's sick. She had to go to the hospital. Kids were sick. It was like, and he goes, oh, and here I'm complaining about this. And I said, no, man, you're good. And he goes, I forget you're a person sometimes. And I was like, what? He goes, I just forget. He goes, I just assume you're just used to doing all this stuff. And I was like, yeah, man. He's like, how do you do it? I was like, I don't know. I was like, I really have no clue, but you just get it done.
Well, and I think you've got, it's one thing to be direct with people, which I think we can, but I also try to give permission. Like my number two right now, he was an athletic director for 10 years. So he's got some perspective of kind of the level of leadership and the burden.
Absolutely.
And so he's got permission if he sees me not doing something, or if he sees me not being attentive to some aspect of the bit, he's got open rein to like sit down and say, hey, we need to, have you thought about this? Or let's look at this and see how we can fix it. And I think that's hard too, because I think even within some of those closest in your leadership team, there's still, because you are the CEO, there's still a barrier there that they're afraid to cross. And like you have to give people permission. And to your point, you have to be humble enough to take it and not just be defensive or then put up a wall with those relationships. And, that just comes with time. I probably wouldn't have handled that well at 26.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
At 47, and you've got a little bit of life experience, and that being able to take that and truly take it from people who care about you and want to see you succeed too. Like you learn to work through that in a positive way and not view that as confrontation.
I'm the same. I've freaked people out in meetings before because I just want to get it right. I don't want to be right. I couldn't care less. And so I'll have an idea that I'm all in on. And if somebody shows me data that I'm wrong, I'm like, no, let's do that. And they're like, well, no, you're just saying that. And I'm like, no, like I agree. And they're like, no, but and they almost get fearful because they're like, you're the CEO, you can't. I'm like, no, man, I like that. Like, let's run with that. Let's get it right. Let's just agree that we all want to get it right. Doesn't matter whose idea it is. Like, let's just agree that we want to get this right. And that's my mentality. But again, I wouldn't have been like that at 26. I'd almost be upset. Another question on a little bit different topic, but I think this is so interesting. I still don't know how I feel about it yet. I think it's good that kids get paid. I think it's bad. But how have you been able to navigate that with Niall? I mean, you see, I'm a huge Nick Saban fan. I hated him when he coached just because I was from Austin, so watching him just dominate was. But now that he's not, and I'm not a Texas fan anymore. The last probably 5-6 years, kind of just fell out being in Dallas and owning the company. You lose kind of track of that stuff. But for a long time, but now I've just fallen in love. So I'm like, man, this guy was just unbelievable. But I listened to him the other day. He said he was like, I was recruiting these kids in my final year, and he's like, I told my wife I'm done after this because I went in, and he's like, I always pitched them about being better kids. We're gonna be great fathers. We're gonna be this. We're gonna be that. And he's like, literally, the guy goes, yeah, that's great, but how much am I gonna get paid? And he just said, I knew that I couldn't impact these kids like I wanted to, so it was time for me to step away and let somebody else do a better job. And I was like, wow, that's never thought about it like that, right? You only think about the upside of, well, these kids are putting in work, they're getting paid, that's great to see. Because I do understand in 6 hand and 1 hand, half a dozen the other, you're asking these kids to dedicate their life to a sport, but then some of them, unfortunately, don't have the financial resources. Like if you come where I come from, I was homeless at 14. My parents couldn't afford for me to live somewhere, and whether you're on a scholarship or not, got to eat. And if you're dedicating your life to football, to basketball, that's like having 2 full-time jobs. And so I understand the aspect of that getting paid, but then you're talking about kids are getting Ferraris and Lambos and millions of dollars. I'm like, is that too much? What's enough? But your thoughts on that, and I need to be delicate, but how have you had to adapt to that with all this changing and social media era?
It's been the most significant change, I think, in college athletics ever, particularly for coaches too. I mean, I just think coaches have had to reinvent everything they do, from cultivating relationships to building culture to putting a roster together. I mean, it changed overnight when this came into play. Couple of thoughts. I think, we certainly put our head in the sand too long, and we all knew it was coming, is when you have TV contracts escalate at the rate that they did in college athletics. And then you start to have coaches go from used to a high-paid coach was making $1 million a year, and now the highest paid are making 10, 11, 12 million a year. And you just look at how everything's grown and everybody's reaped the benefit, but students have still – we had an archaic model that basically said scholarship, room, board, and, that's it. And even kids who had, outside ventures, businesses, maybe they started in high school, like the NCAA would make them pick. You can either do that business and be a professional, or you can shut your business down and be an amateur college athlete. And some of that stuff, we brought it on ourselves. So, we really don't have anywhere to point the finger and blame. But I do think the challenging aspect of it is anytime you put, and it's not like NIL's new. The only thing NIL changed is that the day that the NCAA allowed those payments, the people who mobilized the quickest were those who were already paying players. They were just doing it under the table. So, it's not like NIL's been new. But I do think for students, I do wrestle with this because you are creating a behavior with student athletes today that is not, it's going to be very short-lived. And if they're not smart in how they approach the money they're receiving and just the way they navigate relationships, they're not going to be able to take how they treat these 3 or 4 years there in college when they step into that first $60,000, $70,000 a year job. I mean, it's going to be an eye-opening experience when people aren't catering to you, coming to you, recruiting you, and throwing money, to be honest, that's only driven by a donor's appetite to win. It has nothing to do with your true name, image, and likeness. Yeah. And so I wrestle with that just because I do know we do have some student athletes who leverage this opportunity in the right way, and they're going to be well ahead of the curve when they leave and graduate and step into the real world. Then we've got some who are truly soaking this in, but not really leveraging it in the way it needs to be leveraged. And I think we are creating we try to do our best in the education piece, but like this, when you're talking to 18, 19, 20-year-old young men and women who are coming into significant amounts of money that they've never seen before, they think that's going to last forever. And What they don't realize, this is going to be a very short window where that lifestyle is available to you, so you better be smart with it. And so I worry about that a little bit, but I circle back to kind of what we said at the top. While it's different in the fluctuation of transfers, being able to come and go and leave all the time, it's still the best opportunity in the world, in my opinion, to impact a young man or young woman's life. Like, we will still touch them more even in 1 year, even though it may not be 3 or 4 collectively together. We still have a chance to do our part to try to make that a positive experience. The second thing it highlights, and I think this is, it's probably similar in your workforce, but whether it's turnover just in our staff or you look at roster turnover, it reminds me we can't take for granted sharing what our mission and values are. Like, you have to do that every single day. Like, you feel like you're repeating yourself and you feel like you're like, I just said this but like half that room may be brand new this year. They didn't hear you talk about it last year. And so you have to ad nauseum remind people, here's the important, here's the North Star, here's where we're going, here's what we value here, because you just have so much turnover there. In an old system where you'd have people stay and you'd have 10, 15% turnover, you might get away with not harping on that every day. or when student athletes had a 3 or 4 year experience. But take our football team this year. We led Division I. We've got 74 new players on our roster. So when Coach Morris has to circle up that team, he's starting at zero his
Literally
first team meeting.
new.
He's got to start, and he's got to build the culture and talk about the values and talk about the non-negotiables and where we're going. And, I think that shift in mindset for both administrators and coaches has been very significant, and probably one of the biggest things we feel out of this new era of college athletics.
Well, yeah, because you got to deal with not only getting paid, you deal with transfer portal where they can immediately go. You think there's some adjustments they can make, where it's like, for example, I understand you want to relate to these kids, but let's just say, you offer a kid $100,000 to come play at North Texas or whatever. He gets a deal from a donor, but then immediately next year he has a good season. Somebody offers him $500 and he takes it. Should there be some type of maybe rule or system? And you don't want to limit what kids can make, right? Because you understand, like, somebody goes out there, has a great name, they're active on social media, this is what they worked for their whole life. It's like, that's why I want to be a pro. But is there a way you think they could limit it somehow? Like, hey, if you sign a deal with North Texas to play football here, and you take $100,000, then you have to stay for 2 years. And if you transfer, you have to sit out. Because I do think at some point you do have to limit where, like, hey, if you're going to go take money from a school to go play there, it should be like football. Like, okay, you want to get paid like pros, then you got to play like pros. Where if you sign it's a 2-year, $100,000 deal, you can't go to another school. You're there or you sit out. Because I do think at some point you do have to limit a little bit, that you just get a kid who has to break out. Do you think there's things that they could work to maybe implement to make it a little bit better?
It's tough because we used to have those, and we used to have limitations on the number of times you could transfer and you had to sit. And then when student athletes felt we were restricting their ability to go take advantage of the market, they just basically went from that to nothing. Like, you can now just go whenever you want. I do think the rest where we're wrestling right now with this house settlement case and some of the changes going on is it's really hard. Like, you can collectively bargain those types of things like the pros do.
Yeah.
But when you do that, you're acknowledging that you're viewing a student athlete as an employee, and an employee relationship in college athletics, there's a lot to that. I mean, you look at our level where kids aren't getting 6-7 figure deals. You look at everything they get that's tied up in a scholarship, and you look at everything we provide by way of nutrition, access to nutritionists, sports medicine, therapists, mental health support, equipment, all this stuff. The day that we say a student athlete is an employee, those become taxable benefits. And these student athletes aren't earning enough. Like, by the time you calculate the benefit tax portion of that to what they're getting,
lose money.
They're going to be paying money back.
Yeah.
I mean, and so, that's the part that's tough to wrestle with is you have to get to a place probably in reality where you can collectively bargain these things to keep lawsuits from just flying left and right at the NCAA. But you're going to have to figure out a structure. Does that employment model? It doesn't fit all of college athletics. I mean, a majority of student athletes out there, outside of those at the very top, are not their world, and their access and their benefits is way different than those that are truly driving the revenue.
Yeah.
And so how do you create a model that doesn't just completely crumble the idea of college athletics? I mean, you hear people talk about right now just with a revenue share concept that's being floated, where most of that revenue is coming from. It's from football and basketball. Mm-hmm. Well, if you're going to have to fund revenue share, and you've got all these baked in costs and things you're doing from a benefit and support and services and academic tutors and fill in the blank, like, there's just not a bucket of money to go do that on top of. And so a lot of people are going to have to decide and start tiering sports. And unfortunately, a lot of your Olympic sports are going to be in the crosshairs for either moving to non-scholarship or some people, even though I think it'd be a last resort, talk about, cutting sports and reallocating resources to be able to fund. So it is a wild dynamic right now, one that's hard for us because we can't plan until all these cases settle and then they give us some direction. So we're kind of in a holding pattern right now, just trying to figure out how can we continue to best serve students, but be ready if this model does a 180. How are we gonna change our business? Because it can't look the same.
It's tough. That's why I'm a diehard Lakers, Dodgers fan. I grew up liking them. That's why I really don't have a football team. And this whole model of revenue sharing and everyone's fair has ruined sports for me. Like it would be like telling me that I have to share revenue with other roofing companies because they can't do what they need to do. And I don't like that. It's like, if I've done my job and I've built a great program that drives, if I'm Texas, if I'm Alabama, and I've built a world class, whether it be Michigan, Ohio State, these world class football dynasties, and now you're telling me that I have to give revenue up to other people because they couldn't do what I've done. I don't want to do that. And so I actually kind of stopped being a fan of basketball and really football. Is because this salary cap of like your team can't spend that much. It was like, look, if the owner wants to win and he wants to spend the money, let him spend the money. Because I always thought it was great to watch dynasties over a period of time. But I also thought it was great to watch like people come out of nowhere. And although I was a huge Tom Brady fan, I hated to see him lose. That story of the Giants going 8-8 and the Patriots being 16-0 and then meeting the Super Bowl and they went on a helmet catch is a great story. It's incredible. And it's like, look at this team, stacked team, and look what happened. They had the greatest offense ever, too deep, and then they lose. I'm like, I love those stories. Those stories are great. And now you look at it, it's like every year a different team wins because you have this salary cap and you limit what players can do. And then it forces people to move around. And I get it because you want to make it competitive landscape. But that's also like, stop trying to make it too competitive to where it's not competitive anymore.
Yeah.
And so I don't know. I'm anti that, but I like seeing kids get paid. So it's I guess there's no perfect way, but.
Well, and it is interesting because while school, I don't think we'll ever get to a point where schools have to share revenue to make it a more level playing field. The schools at the top, naturally, there will be a cap on what they can pay their student athletes, which, but I remind our coaches, the reality in college athletics, there's still the same number of kids in the pipeline, period.
Absolutely.
And so the teams at our level that are going to come out of this on the high end and have success are going to be those who can figure out. I mean, we've lost kids to Power 4 programs getting 6-figure salaries every year since this was instituted.
It's crazy.
And when you look at the numbers on those kids, there've only been 1 or 2 of those kids take meaningful snaps and have most of them don't see the field or they're very limited. And so, they got paid, but they're not getting to play. And there's still enough kids. Like if a Power 4 wants to take all the money and get all the top talent, half those kids are going to sit anyway. We just have to identify what's the next bar of talent that can compete amongst the other schools that are left that don't have that talent pool. There's still a path to win.
There's
still a path to have those, those March Madness in basketball and even in your Boise State runs in football, like
ACU run,
Abilene Creek. Like you've got all these examples to point to in history where people still, as long as you got a win on the field, anything can happen. Yeah. And so, like, you just have to I have to work hard with our coaches because they're in the forest and they see what everybody's working with to get paid and what it costs to get a player. But the reality is the pool is the pool. Yep. We just got to move the bar and figure out which set of kids now at our level can go and compete and give us a chance.
And you still have to develop talent. And leadership still trumps all. And if you take all the highest paid players with a shitty coach, unfortunately, they're not going to win.
Oh, yeah.
And it still does. And what did Nick Saban say the other day? They're like, they better hope that they're paying the right kids. I was like, that was so spot on, though, because there's no guarantee you're paying the right kids. There's no guarantee you're getting the right kids because you see kids blossom, you see them take off, they get on the right coaches. So I think that's there. So I know we have to go. I appreciate the time. I want to always ask everyone, and I'm sure you have a great one or two, but what is your favorite 1 or 2 quotes of all time that really resonate with you?
I mean, I shared my John Maxwell quote. I think that one for me right now it's probably home the hardest just because it's the heart of what we want to do. Absolutely. I mean, we want to provide significance back to people. And I feel like at the end of the day, I may ultimately one day get fired in my job in college athletics. That's a reality. It's a competitive environment. But I'm going to go to bed at night and sleep well and feel good about myself. If the wins, losses didn't quite hit where they were needed to, fine. But if I provided significance and value back to the people I got to serve and work with every day and made them better, that's all that I'm asked to do with what God's given me in this life. And so I really try to simplify things and keep that. So that would probably be the one I'm going to always go back to.
I love that. Well, thank you for coming on. Good
I
luck on
appreciate
all
it.
the seasons this year. It's great, man. I enjoyed this, so I appreciate the time.
No, I appreciate the insight and wisdom, and good luck to you guys. You continue to grow.
Thank you.